Hey everybody, Johnny Cage here, welcoming you back to another game review. This time we're taking a look at Legend of the Mystical Ninja, developed and published by Konami, released in February of 1992 for the Super Nintendo. In Legend of the Mystical Ninja, you'll take on the role of Kid Ying or Dr. Yang if playing in two-player mode, investigating a strange occurrence in your hometown of Oedo involving a ghost woman at your local temple, which leads the duo on an adventure involving demons, cat ninjas, and a princess in need of rescuing. You know, typical Japanese stuff. Also, our heroes may be a little hard of hearing, as the font here has got to be the largest I've ever seen in any game, maybe ever. Anyways, dropping you into the first of 9 levels, or Warlock Zones as the game calls them, will have you strolling about the town, doing what else but murdering villagers just going about their business. By doing so, you will collect mostly money in $10 increments, but also pick up scrolls and cat statues along the way that will upgrade your weapon, first to a longer pipe and then to a long-range yo-yo attack. Just make sure not to hit the women, as doing so will lose you money, but running into them will give you a nice bit of extra coin. But what are you gonna do with all that money you've accumulated? Well, you could stop by a shop picking up armor, such as sandals, which will also increase your movement speed. There are also food stalls and inns you can stop by that will give you a health boost. It might just be me, but I feel like the health bar colors should be reversed here. When it's at full, it's all red, and then it turns yellow as you take damage. A little odd, but not a huge deal. Now I know what you're saying, food and armor are great and all, but what about my strong desire to gamble away all my hard-earned coin? Well, no need to worry, because this game has you covered with more than enough minigame options to distract you from your main quest. You got a whack-a-mole game using the D-pad and face buttons on the controller to perform the whacking. This weird goblin game where you have to line up a ball toss, which is much easier said than done. One of those dungeon crawling mazes that can be all sorts of confusing. A horse track where you can make multiple bets on which horses will place first and second. You can even play through the first stage of Gradius, which is an unexpected but very cool addition. And my personal favorite, the painting game, where you do your best to paint a wall with the brush gradually increasing in speed. Not the most fun game in the world, but you can make a lot of money from this one, usually more than doubling what you paid for it each time you give it a go. I could probably make a whole video on the sheer number of these games, as there are enough that Konami could have probably released a cartridge of just them alone. I mean, Level 3 is nothing but an amusement park where you don't have much else to do other than play games and rack up some serious money. Serious money that is probably best saved up for down the road, as the prices for the shops does increase drastically as you progress. You can also come across dojos where for a large chunk of change you can learn different jutsus. These can only be used during the action platforming portion of the level, but can be quite useful for getting through tough sections. Just make sure that you have the POW to execute the techniques which you will gain from collecting 10 of those scrolls you have likely been picking up. Speaking of those action portions, once you've had your fill of running around the hub world and done some exploring, you will likely come across a Tanuki statue that will warn you of the dangerous territory ahead, before vanishing and letting you proceed with what is the second half of the stage. These parts are pretty standard. Most of the time you're just going to be heading to the right, beating up enemies along the way, leading up to a face-off with the level boss. At first these areas are pretty easy to make your way through, though the difficulty does start to really climb by the time you get to around Zone 5, and should you lose all your lives here and game over, you will have to start back from the beginning of the stage, losing all of your money and power-ups you had acquired. But there is one saving grace in the form of this white elephant, which acts as a checkpoint, allowing you to start from where you picked it up, and should you have to step away for a long period of time, you can get passwords, though they aren't exactly the most convenient I have ever come across. The difficulty does become a little rough once you reach the last few levels, but it's not something that you can't persist through with a little bit of patience, and the game does offer unlimited continues, which is nice. I will warn though that the most frustrated I got was in levels 6 and 8, where to enter the action part you first needed to buy a pass for $980, which can be a whole lot, especially if you've suffered a game over. Luckily, as is the norm with this game, there are plenty of gambling areas everywhere to help you gain your money back pretty quick, at least compared to slowly killing one baddie at a time hoping for a money drop. The controls in the game are simple and effective. You can perform a delightful and useful scooch by holding down in either left or right, with both A and Y attacking, B performing your jump, and down B dropping down platforms. L and R will cycle through the few weapons that you can pick up along the way, which is a particularly useful feature since your weapon does degrade if you take a hit, and you may want to switch it out. Tossing coins is always an effective offense though, if you have the money to spare that is. Strangely, it consumes 4 of your own coins rather than an increment of 5 or 10, which seems like it would make more sense. Regardless of which weapon you use though, it is one of those games where you have some frames of animation before your attack strikes, which you have to consider when trying to perfectly time a blow. Also in the hub worlds you do have different sprites on different planes, which can lead to some issues with depth perception, though these are pretty minimal. Visually, the game sports some top-tier graphics, which was the standard for Konami during the 16-bit era. Lots of color and detailed backgrounds, as well as boldly outlined character sprites really help to make them stand out. You also have plenty of creative animations and enemy designs throughout, one of my favorites being these women carrying drink trays, tripping and throwing them at you as their method of attack. The soundtrack is also very appropriate for a mystical Japanese-themed title, featuring a large number of tracks and traditional instrumentals from the country that perfectly fit the action happening on screen. These days, you can pick up a copy of this on the SNES for around $45 American, though if you prefer your Mystical Ninjas to be of the 3D variety, you can pick up either Mystical Ninja starring Goemon or Goemon's Great Adventure on the N64, but those also come with their own fairly large price tags. Sadly, these are the only 3 Goemon titles that have made their way stateside, which isn't all that surprising. Goemon is a figure of ancient Japanese folklore after all, and trying to localize a game based on the mythology of a foreign country can be extremely difficult to pull off. But if you're a fan of this series or importing games in general, then don't let that stop you. Goemon and his friends have been featured in over 20 games total, and that's not even including spin-offs, with his latest adventure being on the DS in 2005. Even with this being the only North American Super Nintendo title, it definitely stands out from the crowd with its adventure RPG open world sections, which flow nicely into the action platforming parts, making for a distinct experience on the console. I'm gonna go ahead and give Legend of the Mystical Ninja 8.5 Narutos out of 10. The game does get quite challenging in the last couple of levels, and the hub worlds can lose their luster after a while, but the amount of variety here has always kept me coming back for more, and is certainly a legend worth discovering for yourself. Thank you everyone for watching, and if you would like to stay posted on new game reviews as I upload them, please click the subscribe button, as well as checking out the link in the description below for my Twitch channel where I stream most days. I'll talk to you all later on.